The elevator chimed its low, tinny bell as the doors slid open on the 30th floor of Lancaster Tech, a floor where polished shoes ruled and janitor boots were ghosts in the marble. Graham Boone stepped out, mop handle in one hand, a supply cart gliding behind him. It was barely 6:15 a.m., the only time he could clean this floor without disrupting the high-level executives who occupied it. To them, this floor was sacred ground. To Graham, it was where silence lived. He moved with the quiet grace of someone used to being invisible. But not to her, Arden Lancaster. She stepped out of her corner office exactly at 6:17 a.m., coffee in hand, white blazer pressed to perfection, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the floor he'd just finished polishing. They passed each other without a word. No smile, no nod, just that look. Not disdain, not recognition. Something quieter, something lonelier. The look that said nothing but meant more than most people's paragraphs. Graham kept his eyes down as he always did, though he could feel the chill of her presence. Arden Lancaster, the CEO, who took a dying legal tech firm and turned it into the nation's most feared AI law engine in under 5 years. She had the posture of someone who trusted no one, the gaze of someone who'd been betrayed too many times, and the schedule of someone who'd long forgotten how to rest. She vanished back into her office, and Graham. He kept mopping, until a tiny voice broke the morning routine. "Daddy." "Can I have the purple marker, Emma?" His daughter, 10 years old. Curious eyes and a backpack twice her size. She'd had a mild fever the night before, too high for school, not high enough to stay home alone. So Graham brought her here tucked away in a supply closet repurposed into a makeshift fort with a sleeping bag, crackers, and markers. He rushed back to her crouched down, handed her the purple one. "Shh, Peanut," he whispered. "Remember our deal. Quiet as a kitten, okay?" Emma nodded solemnly, her pigtails bouncing. Then came the unexpected sound of high heels approaching fast. "Arden." She stopped at the closet door. Graham stood tall, blocking the view, preparing to apologize, to explain, to beg. But she didn't demand anything. She didn't ask for HR. She looked past him and crouched down, to Emma's level. "Well, aren't you the little artist?" Arden said softly, spotting the notebook filled with crayon sketches. "What's your name, Emma?" the girl said, clutching the book. Arden reached into her bag and pulled out a chocolate bar, the expensive kind with sea salt and dark cocoa. "Only smart girls get the good stuff," she said, handing it over with a wink. Emma giggled. Graham blinked, unsure what just happened. Arden Lancaster had smiled. At his daughter. "Thank you, ma'am," he said quietly, but she was already walking away. Later that week, Graham found the drawing Emma had done after meeting Arden. She had drawn 3 stick figures herself, her dad and Miss Arden complete with a superhero cape, boots, and what might have been a justice scale. He folded the drawing and placed it in the small metal locker with his name on it. For some reason, he couldn't throw it away. But not everything in Lancaster Tech was as warm as a child's sketch. Over the following days, Graham noticed strange things. Printers whirring after hours. Office lights on at 2 a.m. Data sets that were supposed to be protected being accessed from shadow admin accounts. He didn't mean to notice, he never wanted to, but he had a memory for patterns. That came from his old life. Back before he held a mop. Back when he held people's futures in his closing arguments. Once he would have raised alarms, written a memo, led an internal investigation. Now he clocked out and walked away. Because getting involved meant drawing attention. And attention was dangerous. He had a daughter to raise, bills to pay, and no one left to call for favors. Then came the whisper. In the break room, 2 suited men. Not executives. Legal staff. They didn't know he was there, crouched behind a vending machine fixing a jammed coil. "She doesn't even know what's coming," one of them said. "She thinks she owns this company. Wait until the audit hits." The other laughed. "She'll fall. And when she does, the board's ours." Graham froze. They were talking about Arden. He waited until they left, then stepped out slowly, his knuckles white around the wrench. It wasn't his business, he told himself that. But that night in the quiet hallway outside the executive printer room, he saw it again, the same print job running 3 times between 2:12 and 2:15 a.m. He checked the job logs. One stood out. Modified by admin Ghost Graham didn't know who that was. But he knew one thing: Arden Lancaster was being set up, and no one else seemed to care. He returned to the supply closet and watched Emma sleep. Her head rested on a folded jacket, a drawing half-finished beside her. He picked it up. This one was different. Not a superhero. It was a courtroom, a stick-figure judge, and beside her a janitor holding a mop like a sword. He smiled, then stared, then folded it and slipped it into his pocket. Tomorrow he would go back to mopping floors. But tonight, something inside him had stirred. He had promised himself to never fight again. Not after what the system had taken from him. But if no one else would stand for Arden, maybe the man who cleaned up everyone else's messes was the only one who still knew how. The boardroom on the 30th floor was a glass coffin of cold light and colder stairs. Arden Lancaster sat at the head of the long marble table spine, straight chin lifted, but her fingers, resting on a legal folder, flexed once, twice. She scanned the faces seated before her CTO, Daniel Voss, CFO, Elise Monroe, head of Legal Dean Marcus. Each of them had once toasted her victories with overpriced bourbon. Now, their eyes flickered like they were already rewriting history without her in it. The morning sun bounced off the skyline behind her, but the room itself was gray. Gray suits, gray hearts, gray intentions. Dean cleared his throat. "Arden, this isn't a formal hearing," he said smoothly, "but there are concerns. You've seen the audit reports." She flipped open the folder. Charts, logs, a highlighted paragraph referencing algorithmic manipulation detected arbitration case 4782. Her eyes scanned the details. Decisions made by their flagship AI legal tool. LexiCorp were showing a pattern of bias rulings increasingly in favor of corporate clients over individuals. "I didn't authorize any changes to the arbitration logic," Arden said flatly. Daniel Voss leaned forward, fingers laced. "But your login did." There it was, the trap. She felt it snap shut, soundless but absolute. "I've said it before," she replied calmly. "My admin access is limited. Our CTO and legal counsel have override privileges, as does the board's security team." Dean offered a patronizing smile. "We're not accusing anyone yet, but if this gets out..." If Arden cut in, "You already leaked it. No one denied it." Arden Elise added, voice syrupy, "We just want to protect the company's reputation. The SEC is circling and investors are jumpy. Maybe it's time you took a leave of absence. Let us handle this." Arden leaned back slowly. So this was how it would happen. Not with a shout, with a smile and a knife behind the back. She stood, meeting adjourned, and without waiting for consensus, she walked out. That night, Graham Boone was cleaning the executive kitchen when he heard voices through the cracked server room door, hushed, sharp, unguarded. "She's already dead in the water," said Dean Marcus. Daniel replied, "She doesn't know how deep this goes. By the time she figures it out, we'll have sold to Equinox Group and cashed out." Graham froze mid-sweep. Equinox Group. He remembered the name. A mega conglomerate that had been circling Lancaster Tech like vultures for years. Arden had fought them off more than once, publicly, fiercely, and now her own people were handing her over like a sacrifice. He backed away before they could see him and ducked into a supply closet. His heart pounded not from fear, from fury. He looked at his phone. The same print job had gone out last night. 2:14 a.m. Same signature admin Ghost Graham opened the company's internal file viewer using his Janitor login low-level access, but enough to see print histories. A series of massive documents had been printed from Dean Marcus's office, time-stamped, cross-referenced with the AI logic logs. They were rewriting decision trees, retroactively, erasing digital fingerprints, shifting accountability. Arden hadn't failed. She'd been framed. The next day he sat beside Emma on the cracked bench outside the building. She was drawing again this time, a woman with square glasses and a cape standing on top of a building while shadows crept beneath her. "Who's that?" he asked gently. "Miss Arden." Emma said, not looking up. "She looks like how I feel when people laugh at my drawings." Graham swallowed the lump in his throat. "She's always alone," Emma added, then paused. "But maybe that's because no one tells her she's good." By midnight, Graham was in the copy room alone. He wasn't wearing a janitor's vest anymore, just a hoodie, gloves, and determination. He pulled a set of maintenance blueprints from the wall drawings only someone like him would know existed. Behind the panel near the service elevator was an unused network access point connected to the original staging server. Graham slid the panel aside, connected his old laptop, ran a silent boot, and found it. The change logs, the algorithm rollback scripts, the terminal entries all routed through the same dummy account. It all led back to the same source. He saved everything on a drive. The truth was there, but truth without trust was noise. The next morning he took the stairs to the 30th floor. He wasn't pushing a mop. He wasn't supposed to be there. But he knocked on Arden's door anyway. She looked up from her desk, startled, then suspicious. "I need 5 minutes," Graham said. "No more." She hesitated, then nodded. He stepped inside and placed a folder on her desk. Inside the printed logs, the IP traces, a list of after-hours logins, a diagram Emma had drawn, tucked on top. "I don't want anything," he said, voice low but firm. "I'm not trying to get a reward. I just want my daughter to grow up knowing her father didn't turn his back when someone was being buried alive." Arden didn't move, didn't speak, but her hands gripped the folder like it was air after drowning. "You need to back up the staging server from the 14th of last month," he added, "before they wipe it." "How do you know this?" she asked quietly. Graham looked her in the eye. "I used to practice law," he said, "before the law stopped practicing justice." That afternoon the subpoenas arrived. Official, cold, merciless. Arden Lancaster was being formally summoned to court under federal investigation. Fraud, conspiracy, data tampering. Her face hit the front page of every business site by sundown. Her board cut ties. Her investors disappeared. Her legal team resigned. And, in the center of the firestorm, Arden stood alone. Except for the janitor who used to sweep past her office without a word. She found him in the parking lot as the sun set. Emma was asleep in the back seat. "I don't know how to fight this," she admitted. "You don't have to," Graham replied. "Not alone." She looked at him like she'd never seen him before. "Not really. What were you before?" He shrugged. "A man who thought the truth was enough. It wasn't. Not back then. And now I've got something worth standing for." From the back seat, Emma stirred and rolled over in her sleep. And somewhere buried beneath years of silence and suspicion, something soft cracked open in Arden Lancaster's chest. A sliver of trust, a breath of belief. The rain came down like a confession that night, steady, relentless, as if the sky itself had something to say. Graham Boone sat at the kitchen table of their tiny two-bedroom apartment above the auto shop. A bowl of half-eaten mac and cheese sat in front of him, now cold. Emma had already gone to bed, her sketchbook clutched to her chest like a stuffed animal. He could hear her soft breathing from the other room, steady, peaceful. But his own chest was tight. The folder Arden had clutched earlier now sat in front of him again. Copies. Printed versions of the files he'd found, hidden access logs, altered AI code, and a trail of digital fingerprints leading to the people smiling in all the company brochures. He should have left it alone. That's what he told himself again and again. He wasn't a lawyer anymore. He was just a janitor, a single dad, a man with a mop, not a mission. But Emma's voice echoed in his memory from earlier that evening. "Daddy, do you think Miss Arden's sad?" "Why do you ask, Bug?" "Because." Her eyes looked like mine did. "Right after Mom." The words had stopped him cold. Kids saw things, not always with facts, but with instinct. And Emma, bless her innocent heart, had recognized something that most adults missed. Arden Lancaster wasn't just a CEO fighting off scandal. She was a woman being left to drown by the very people who'd once praised her, and Graham. He was standing on the shore, watching. The next morning, he didn't put on his usual coveralls. Instead, he pulled on jeans and a dark hoodie. Neutral. Quiet. Invisible. He dropped Emma off at school early and headed straight back to Lancaster Tech, not to mop, but to dig deeper. The company used a proprietary AI tool for all legal modeling. LexiCore. What the public didn't know was that it also tracked internal legal behavior approvals document flows timestamps. And deep in the staging server, there was something called Mirror Node, a shadow log that silently backed up changes every 12 hours. Graham had helped write that script. Years ago, before he walked away. He rode the freight elevator to the basement and entered the old server room through the maintenance corridor using a keycard that hadn't been revoked only because no one thought janitors needed to be dangerous. He slid his laptop into the port and waited. The screen flickered. Loaded. There it was, Mirror Node still active. A timestamp log from 2:14 a.m. on the 14th of last month. He opened it. There, in cold precision overrides to arbitration weights. A shift in decision probabilities nudging the system to rule in favor of corporate clients over individuals by a margin of 1.7%. It seemed small, insignificant. But in a courtroom, that was enough to ruin 100 lives. And at the bottom of the file, one final line. Modified by admin ghostroot. Graham leaned back. He knew that handle. Years ago, Dean Marcus had used it as a joke during security drills. Now it was being used to gut the integrity of LexiCore from the inside. He walked out of the building into a cold wind. Every instinct told him to let it go. Walk away. Protect Emma. Keep the small, safe world he'd built with calloused hands and quiet nights. But then he remembered the day he lost his wife. They'd been in court. She was suing for malpractice over a fatal hospital error. Graham had tried to be her attorney and her husband. The judge had thrown out key evidence on a technicality. She died 2 weeks later, and so did Graham's faith in the system. He'd walked away from law that day. And now, here he was again. Another woman, another system, another storm. Only this time, a 10-year-old girl was watching. He couldn't walk away. Not again. That night, while Emma worked on her science project at the kitchen table, Graham printed out the audit trails. The metadata. The terminal logs. He slid them into a manila folder and stared at it for a long time. "What you working on?" Emma asked. "Something grown up," he answered gently. She smiled. "Is it boring?" "It used to be. Now?" "It's not." She returned to her glitter glue and construction paper. Graham stood across the room and gently tucked a blanket over her shoulders. He wasn't fighting for justice anymore. He was fighting for legacy. The next day, he intercepted Arden in the underground parking garage. She was standing alone beside her Tesla, looking like a statue carved from tension. He held out the folder. I backed up the server logs. "Mirror Node is still intact. I printed what I could." She looked at him like he'd handed her a live grenade. "I thought you just swept floors. I sweep truth now." She exhaled slowly, eyes scanning the first page. Her hands trembled slightly. "I don't know if this will save me," she said. "It's not just about you," Graham replied. "They're using LexiCore to make decisions in real courtrooms. You know that, right?" She looked up sharply. "You're saying, this isn't just internal. It hasn't been for a long time." That night, Arden called a private backup firm. She gave them access to the full staging server and requested a secure image of the logs time-stamped, sealed, and notarized. Then she called the board. No one answered. By morning, the subpoena came. A federal investigation was opening. The story hit every major network. Lancaster Tech CEO under fire for AI legal fraud. They flashed her mugshot taken years ago at a startup awards ceremony like it was evidence of guilt. Her face cold, ambitious, easy to hate, Reporters circled like sharks. Investors pulled out. Employees walked out. And, in the middle of it all, Arden Lancaster sat in her office alone, tired but not defeated. Because someone had decided to stay. Back at home, Graham tucked Emma in. She clutched her latest drawing him in a suit standing beside Arden at a courthouse. Emma had drawn a big American flag in the background and a sign that said, "Justice is a choice." "Do you think you'll have to go to court, Daddy?" "I think I already have." "Will Miss Arden be okay?" He paused. "That depends. On what?" "On whether we still believe in what's right, even when no one else does." Emma smiled, eyes heavy. "Then I think she will." The walls of Arden's office had never felt this narrow. It was past midnight. Outside the glass windows of the 30th floor, the city sprawled beneath her like a quiet accusation. Headlines screamed her name from every screen. Her inbox pinged relentlessly. Legal threats, investor withdrawals, press demands. But inside it was silence. She sat behind her desk, back rigid, the weight of a crumbling empire pressing down on her shoulders. A half-drunk coffee had gone cold at her elbow. Her phone buzzed again. Dean Marcus. "You may want to resign now before this goes federal." She didn't respond. She couldn't, because for the first time in her entire career, Arden Lancaster had no idea who to trust. And then came a knock. Soft, hesitant. Not from the board, not from legal. She looked up and there he was. The janitor. Graham Boone. Wearing his faded blue work jacket, a manila folder in hand. Not his usual mop, not his quiet shuffle. Something in his eyes looked steady, unshakable. He stepped in. "Evening, ma'am," he said, voice low, but certain. She narrowed her eyes. "Mr. Boone, what are you doing up here?" He held up the folder. "I brought you this." She didn't move. "If this is a request for anything, money references, this isn't the time." Graham didn't flinch. "I don't want anything." He placed the folder on her desk and slid it across. "I just want my daughter to know her dad didn't stay quiet when the truth got buried." That stopped her cold. She stared at the folder, but didn't touch it. "I don't even know who you are," she said, arms crossing. Graham gave the faintest smile. "That's fair. I've been invisible here for a long time." He turned to leave, but then paused at the door. "If I were you," he said, "I'd request all backup data from the night of the 14th, before they erase it." And just like that, he was gone. Arden sat still for a long moment. She should have dismissed it. She'd spent her career sharpening her instincts, filtering out noise, but something about the way he spoke. She reached for the folder and flipped it open. At first it looked like gibberish logs, metadata, terminal scripts, but as her eyes scanned the printouts, a slow chill crawled up her spine. The system logs matched her own approvals. Almost. But they'd been altered by someone using her credentials. Her heart kicked in her chest. She picked up her phone. "Matt, get me the IT backups. Full records. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. Move." By sunrise, the subpoena arrived. The Department of Justice was opening an official inquiry into Lancaster Tech's legal AI systems. The scandal had crossed state lines. Now it was federal. Arden stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office as the building buzzed beneath her like a shaken hive. Employees whispered. Executives ducked out. The board issued a statement that afternoon. Lancaster Tech's CEO acted independently of board oversight. "We condemn all wrongdoing and will fully cooperate with authorities." They'd thrown her to the wolves. By sunset, her company badge had been deactivated. Her legal counsel, Dean Marcus, officially withdrew representation citing conflict of interest. The sharks had turned inward, and she was bleeding alone. That night, she didn't go home. She returned to the one room in the building where no one thought to look, an unused office down in records. There, Graham sat at an old desk, flipping through physical logs and time-stamped paper trails. She stared at him for a long moment. "You knew this would happen," she said. Graham didn't look up. "I suspected, and you still helped me." This time he met her eyes. "My daughter thinks you're a superhero." Arden blinked, caught off guard. "She drew you," he said, "cape and all." A small, stunned laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it. The sound surprised them both. "I'm not a hero, Mr. Boone. She doesn't know that, and maybe neither do I." They worked through the night. Together they uncovered time-stamped access trails, cross-referenced badge swipes with printer logs, traced data rollbacks embedded in auto-cleaning scripts, and then, buried deep in the mirrored server drive, they found it. An audio recording. Unfiltered, uncut. Dean Marcus. CFO, Dalton Reeves. CTO, Lisa Hart. 3 of her most trusted. "We'll shift the staging code. She won't notice. By the time the feds catch wind, we'll be long gone with the buyout deal signed." Arden's hand shook as she paused the recording. Graham didn't speak. He didn't need to. They both knew what it meant. This wasn't just corporate betrayal, it was premeditated. And it had a paper trail. Later that night, Emma lay curled on the old leather couch in the corner of the room, a blanket tucked under her chin. She'd come by after school, a peanut butter sandwich still clutched in one hand, and quietly fallen asleep to the hum of printers and low conversation. Arden knelt beside her, watched her sleep. "Does she know what's happening?" she whispered. "No," Graham said. "But she knows enough." Arden reached out and gently brushed a lock of hair from the girl's forehead. "She's lucky," she murmured. "She's my whole world," Graham said quietly, then a beat. "And I think she sees something in you that I forgot how to." Arden looked up. "What's that?" He smiled faintly. "Good." She held his gaze, eyes softer than they had been in weeks. "I don't have much left," she said, "except what we found tonight. And maybe this room." Graham glanced at Emma, then back to Arden. "Sometimes," he said, "that's enough." The next morning, a letter arrived at Graham's apartment. Official court stationery. Subject witness summons. Technical forensics testimony. His hands tightened around the paper. It was time. He wasn't sweeping floors anymore. He was about to sweep the lies off the record. By noon, the story had cracked wide open. Not from Arden, not from the board, but from someone inside. A whistleblower. An anonymous email hit every major legal blog and business news outlet. Internal sabotage at Lancaster Tech. AI ethics violated whistleblower evidence forthcoming. And just like that, the wolves that had once circled Arden began to circle each other. The office felt like it was holding its breath. Glass doors stayed shut. Office lights dimmed early, and every time someone passed Graham in the hallway, they seemed to blink like they were trying to remember if they'd ever looked him in the eye before. The janitor, still in his faded uniform, still with his quiet steps, but suddenly visible. He walked past the legal department that afternoon. The nameplate on Dean Marcus's office was gone. So was Dean. In the executive suite, Arden stood at the window, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the skyline she used to own. She hadn't spoken to the press. Not once. But they were speaking for her wild headlines, doctored narratives, half-truths wrapped in confident language. She didn't flinch when her interim replacement was announced. She didn't blink when her email was suspended. She only turned when Graham entered holding a newspaper still warm from the vending machine downstairs. He set it on her desk. The headline read, "Lancaster CEO alone in the fire. Board claims. No knowledge of data sabotage." She skimmed it. "They've disowned me," she said flatly. "They fear you'll survive this," Graham replied. She let out a dry breath. "I don't even have legal representation." "You have something better." Arden raised an eyebrow. "Please tell me you didn't go to law school." "I did?" She froze. Graham nodded slowly. "A lifetime ago. Before Emma. Before everything." He pulled out a faded bar card from his wallet. It was cracked, but the name was still visible. Graham Ellis Boone. Member State. Bar of Massachusetts. Her voice came quieter now. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" He shrugged. "People don't tend to ask the janitor where he went to law school." A pause. Then more seriously, "I had a family. A case went sideways. I lost everything but her. So I stopped fighting. Until now." That night, in a quiet back room usually reserved for inventory, they spread out their findings like pieces of a war map. Logs, audio clips, photocopied memos, and Emma's drawing tucked gently on top, a stick figure version of Graham standing in a courtroom holding hands with Arden. Above their heads, Emma had drawn stars and written in large block letters, "My dad tells the truth." Arden stared at it for a long time. "She believes in you," she whispered. "She believes in us," he corrected. "That's why I'm here." The next morning, headlines shifted. A new leak revealed conflicting financials documents suggesting the board had already been in talks to sell off Lancaster Tech's patent library to a rival firm. The twist: the meeting had been arranged 2 weeks before Arden was accused, before the algorithm had even been flagged. It wasn't sabotage, it was a setup. And the people pulling the strings were the very ones who'd claimed innocence. Back at the office, tension thickened. CFO Dalton stopped showing up altogether. CTO Lisa Hart claimed illness, and legal sent a memo saying ongoing investigation prevents further comment. Everyone else, they whispered, they watched. And when Graham passed through with his mop bucket, they moved aside like they weren't sure what power he held, but they knew better than to block it. That evening, Arden found Graham in the break room kneeling beside Emma, who was coloring on the floor. He was tying her shoelaces, gentle patient, and telling her a story about a lion who'd lost his roar but still protected the forest. Arden leaned on the doorframe arms, crossed something soft in her expression. "She doesn't know what kind of storm she's sitting in," Arden said quietly. "She knows what matters," Graham replied, looking up. "That truth matters. That kindness matters." Emma looked up, grinning. "Daddy said you're brave." Arden smiled, surprised. "Did he now?" Emma nodded, handing her a drawing. "This is you. I gave you a cape this time." On the paper, Arden stood next to a building, arms outstretched like wings, her hair blowing in the wind. Underneath it said, "Miss Arden saves the world with her brain and her heart." Arden blinked. Tears threatened, but she swallowed them back. "I don't have much left, Graham. You have enough." "Enough for what?" "To stand up," he said, "even when they want you flat on the floor." That night, the doorbell to Graham's apartment buzzed. He opened it to find a court courier. The envelope was heavy. He tore it open. Notice of testimony. Commonwealth Visa Lancaster. Subpoena to appear as expert witness. Data. Forensics. His hands didn't shake. Not this time. Behind him, Emma peeked around the corner, holding her stuffed elephant. "Daddy," she whispered. "Is it happening?" He crouched beside her. "It is baby." She nodded seriously. "Will you tell the truth?" Graham kissed her forehead, always. Back in her townhouse, Arden opened a plain manila envelope Graham had left for her. Inside, she found 1. A handwritten list of questions to expect from the prosecution. 2. An outline of counter-arguments. 3. A note at the bottom, "The system turned against you. That doesn't mean you stop standing straight." She folded the paper with trembling hands, and, for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not a victory smile, not yet, but the kind you wear when the war isn't over but the courage has returned. The building was quiet after 8 p.m., too quiet for a company once humming with ambition ethics panels and late-night coding marathons. But tonight, Lancaster Tech sat like a ghost ship drifting through scandal. In the dim-lit executive suite, 2 figures were still moving, one sweeping through folders like a soldier in enemy territory. The other cross-referencing data backups, coffee long gone cold beside her. Arden Lancaster. Graham Boone. They weren't boss and janitor anymore, not tonight. They were survivors, investigators, truth-tellers. And, with dawn, came the trial. Start from the timestamp. Graham said, fingers flying across the old company laptop Arden had pulled from archives. 2:41 a.m. "Night of the algorithm patch," Arden replied. "We've checked the logs, the print queue, the staging build. It's like someone cleaned up after themselves too well." "Too well," Graham echoed, narrowing his eyes, "which is exactly what makes it suspicious." He tapped a few keys, opening the raw metadata left in the backups. "There," he muttered. Arden leaned over his shoulder. "What am I looking at?" Graham zoomed in. "See that hash string? That's a mismatch. The master audit log was overwritten, but this backup wasn't updated. There's a digital footprint someone cloned and planted fake approvals. Arden blinked. They forged the entire executive sign-off, and they used your login to do it. For a moment, silence. Only the faint hum of server fans and the ticking of the old analog clock above the coffee maker. Then Arden sat back, spine stiffening. They wanted me gone. Sell off the company, collect their bonuses, and walk clean. Graham looked at her, and they almost did. But not tomorrow, she said, her voice steady now. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Emma was curled up on the office couch, her head resting on her unicorn backpack, a soft lullaby playing on her headphones. She stirred slightly when Graham pulled a blanket up to her shoulders. "She's asleep?" Arden asked. He nodded. "Out like a light." "She's a strong kid," Arden said softly. "She sees everything, even when you think she doesn't." Graham smiled faintly. "She told me last week she wants to be a judge, said she wants to decide who's telling the truth." Arden's eyes softened. "I'd trust her more than most courtrooms." They shared a quiet laugh, and something in the space between them shifted. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was connection, built not from words, but from endurance. As the hours ticked on, the pieces of the puzzle started to lock in. An audio file recovered from the server's voice backup system, where Dean Marcus and CTO Lisa Hart discussed framing Arden to trigger a forced resignation clause. A screenshot of CFO Dalton's calendar, a secret meeting with a rival corporation 2 days before the board turned on Arden. And perhaps most chilling, a scanned internal memo never sent dated weeks before the scandal. It was from Arden, a proposal to implement stricter ethical oversight on all AI projects. "She saw it coming," Graham whispered, reading the draft. "You tried to stop them before they made the move. They knew I would," Arden said. "That's why they struck first." At 2:17 a.m., the printer coughed to life. The room filled with the warm, rhythmic sound of paper spooling. 17 pages. Every one of them stamped with time-stamped evidence backups, access logs, unsigned approvals, and admin overrides from accounts traced to everyone, except Arden. She gathered the stack, clipped them neatly, and placed them in a black folder. "You'll testify?" she asked. Graham nodded. "Under oath. And if they ask why a janitor was digging through digital forensics," he met her gaze. "Because I couldn't watch another innocent person get buried by power." She didn't look away. "You could have stayed quiet." "I almost did," he admitted. "But then Emma drew you in a cape." Arden laughed, a sound that hadn't touched her throat in weeks. "Guess I owe her a thank you." "No," Graham said. "I do." They sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that only comes when two people have already said everything that matters. At some point, Arden reached into her bag and pulled out a folded napkin. On it, a short note in quick, sharp handwriting. She passed it to Graham. He read, "If I lose tomorrow, I still want you to know this company was never about power. It was about building a better justice system for kids like your daughter who might not have a voice otherwise." He looked up, eyes tight. "Then let's make sure you don't lose." As dawn bled orange over the Boston skyline, they watched the sun rise together from the glass balcony outside the office. Below them, the world was waking up. Above them, headlines were already brewing. But in that quiet, suspended moment, there was no courtroom, no betrayal, no algorithms, just two people who had nothing left to hide. "I never thanked you," Arden said. "You don't have to. I do, for standing." "I was just cleaning the floor," Graham said with a slight smile. "Turns out there was a lot more to clean." They turned back toward the office where Emma had just stirred. She sat up, hair-messy eyes blinking at the light. Arden smiled gently. "Good morning, counselor." Emma grinned back sleepily. "Is it court day?" "It is," Graham replied, kneeling to tie her shoelaces. "And your drawing's coming with me." As they left the building together, Graham held Emma's hand in one and the black folder of truth in the other. Arden walked beside them, no longer just a CEO, but a woman about to fight for her name, and a man who once lost everything, finally choosing to rise again. The courtroom was packed. Not just with attorneys and press, but with something heavier. Something that made the air feel thick. Anticipation. Or maybe doubt. Every seat was filled. Every eye curious. Every whisper sharp enough to cut through the silence. Graham Boone stepped through the double doors in his janitor uniform. His shirt was pressed the navy fabric still faintly scented with lavender detergent, the same one he always used on Emma's clothes. His shoes were polished. His hands trembled only slightly, but what stood out most was the fact that he didn't belong, not in this room, not with the cameras, the glare, the suits that cost more than his monthly rent, and yet this floor was where everything had led him, a place where truth didn't always win, unless someone fought for it. The clerk announced next witness Graham Boone. He walked slowly to the stand. Not because he was unsure, but because he understood the weight of every step. Across the gallery, Emma sat between two volunteers from the Legal Aid Center. She clutched her sketchbook to her chest, eyes wide, feet swinging above the floor. Arden sat at the defense table, alone. But when Graham looked her way, she gave him a nod, just a small one. Not a command, not a plea, just faith. The prosecutor stood, tall, sharp-suited, oozing with practiced confidence. "Mr. Boone, can you please state your occupation for the court?" "I'm a janitor," Graham replied. He beat, just long enough for the chuckles to ripple. The prosecutor gave a thin smile. "And how long have you worked at Lancaster Tech? 4 years. Third shift. Maintenance. And in your capacity as maintenance. Were you also tasked with digital forensic analysis?" Soft laughter from the gallery. The judge rapped the gavel. Graham didn't blink. "No, sir, but I did maintain every server room backup node and archive station on floors B1 through 5. I know which cables carry what. I know when someone touches a system they're not supposed to." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "So, you're saying you monitored the building?" "I'm saying I paid attention," Graham replied, "even when nobody else did." He asked for permission to present visual evidence. The judge allowed it. Graham walked to the projector like he was pushing a mop bucket. But when he turned it on, the room shifted. Slide 1. A print log time-stamped 2:41 a.m., 2 days before the AI scandal broke. Slide 2. Security footage, grainy but clear, of CTO Lisa Hart entering the secure print room alone. Slide 3. A metadata hash, corrupted but traceable, showing that the document had been modified using an unauthorized root account ghost root. The gallery stopped laughing. Graham's voice stayed calm. This account was never approved. It existed outside protocol, and it was used to alter the AI output without the CEO's knowledge. Slide 4. A backup camera feed showing Dean Marcus, the company's own legal counsel, removing files from a locked cabinet at 3:18 a.m. Slide 5. A memo, unsent, authored by Arden Lancaster, requesting a freeze on all AI rollouts until further testing for racial bias could be completed. "She tried to stop them," Graham said. "They erased her warning before it could reach the board." Now, even the judge was leaning forward. "Mr. Boone," the prosecutor said, scrambling. "Now you expect this court to believe that you uncovered all this?" Graham looked straight at him. "Not because I wanted to." The room held its breath. "But because I couldn't explain to my daughter why a good person was being destroyed for doing the right thing." Silence. Heavy. Personal. Graham let it sit. "She asked me." He continued, voice shaking slightly. "She asked if people always get punished for standing alone." He swallowed. "And I couldn't say no. Not again." The defense attorney stepped forward. A woman in her early 30s, young but sharp. "Mr. Boone," she said softly, "have you ever testified in court before?" "Yes." A murmur. "Under what circumstances?" Graham hesitated, then met her eyes. "I used to be a defense attorney, years ago, until I lost a case that shouldn't have been lost. It cost a man his life." Gasps swept through the room. Arden blinked, stunned. But Graham kept going. "I quit after that. I couldn't carry a briefcase anymore. but I still knew what justice looked like, and what it didn't. The prosecutor jumped to his feet. Objection irrelevant. The judge waved it off. On the contrary, it's highly relevant, and now the court wasn't just listening. They were watching. Slide 6. A video clip, Arden standing alone in the boardroom confronting the entire executive team, her voice trembling but firm. "This isn't about profit," she said. "It's about people." And then, Slide 7. An email signed by CFO Dalton, planning a merger with a tech conglomerate set to profit only if Arden was removed. The room erupted. By the time Graham stepped down, the courtroom had changed. Not physically, but spiritually. He walked back to the gallery, past press, past attorneys, past power, and sat beside Emma. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "You were amazing," she whispered. He smiled. "I was honest." Arden stood now, her turn. But before she moved, she glanced back at Graham. This time it wasn't a nod. It was something deeper, something that said, "You didn't just save me. You saved what we built." The courtroom had fallen into a reverent hush. Graham's testimony still echoed in the air like the last chord of a song no one wanted to end. Now all eyes turned to her. Arden Lancaster stood, slowly. Not with the elegance of a billionaire CEO gliding across a boardroom, but with the steady exposed weight of someone carrying the truth on her shoulders. She wasn't wearing one of her tailored power suits today, just a simple navy dress. No jewelry, no gloss. Her hair was pulled back not for style, but to keep it out of her face, to see clearly, to be seen clearly. She stepped onto the stand. The bailiff swore her in. The judge gave her a nod, and when she turned toward the gallery, she didn't look for the cameras, or the board members who'd refused to show. She looked for one person, and found him. Graham sat near the back next to Emma. Their eyes met, and for the first time in months, Arden felt something solid beneath her feet. Not the marble floor, not the legal team's assurances, but trust. Raw, earned, undeniable. The defense attorney approached the bench. "Miss Lancaster, could you walk us through the events leading up to your removal as CEO?" Arden took a breath. Not to steady herself, but to release the pressure of silence. "I founded Lancaster Tech to build solutions that didn't leave people behind," she began. "That was my promise. And when our AI models began showing signs of bias, I paused everything." She glanced toward the projector. "People told me it would cost us millions, that we'd lose investors. I said we'd lose more if we launched something that harmed the very communities we claimed to serve." She paused, eyes burning with quiet fire. "I didn't know then that my own board had made other plans. That while I was freezing development, they were leaking manipulated data to the press, data designed to show I was unstable, indecisive, and incapable of leadership." She turned, slightly facing the judge now. "My CTO and CFO crafted a narrative that I ignored internal concerns, that I greenlit a flawed system, that I endangered the company." Another pause. "None of it was true. And I could have fought back. I could have exposed them. So why didn't you?" her attorney asked gently. Arden's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I didn't want to burn down the company I built. Just to prove I wasn't the villain." There it was, the reckoning. Not of facts, Graham had already brought those. This was something else. The reckoning of her silence, her choices, her loneliness. The prosecutor stepped forward now, trying to regain control. "Miss Lancaster, isn't it true that you signed off on every phase of AI development I did?" Arden replied. "And that several reports of data anomalies were brought to your attention?" They were. "So you admit responsibility." "I admit leadership," she said firmly. "And leadership means listening even when it hurts. It means pausing a billion-dollar rollout to ask hard questions. And it means being willing to be the bad guy, if that's what it takes to do the right thing." The room rippled. Somewhere near the back, a journalist scribbled faster. The prosecutor frowned. "Miss Lancaster, you're painting yourself as a martyr." She didn't flinch. "I'm painting myself as someone who made a promise to serve, not sell. And yet your own executives say you were emotionally unstable during this time. Arden didn't blink. I was under pressure. I was grieving. I was working 20-hour days trying to untangle the ethical implications of what we'd built. If being emotionally affected by injustice is instability, then I hope we all become unstable. A silence swept the room again. This time it wasn't heavy. It was charged, like something had shifted, and then softly, almost too softly, the judge leaned forward. "Do you have anything else you wish to say to the court, Miss Lancaster?" She looked down, then up, and for the first time, her voice trembled. "When I was a little girl, my mother told me that courage doesn't always sound like a roar. Sometimes, it's just the voice that says, 'I'll try again tomorrow.'" She looked toward Emma, and when I met Graham's daughter, when she hugged me like I mattered, I remembered what that voice sounded like. She turned to the bench. I lost everything trying to do the right thing, but if I had to go back, I would still choose the truth. Because at the end of the day, the company we build, the legacy we leave, it's not in algorithms or IPOs. Her voice broke. It's in the people we refuse to give up on. Silence fell like snow, not a sound. Even the reporters stopped typing. Even the prosecutor lowered his notes, and for the first time since the trial began, the judge didn't look bored or tired. He looked moved. Graham let out a slow breath. Emma squeezed his hand. And Arden, she stepped down from the witness stand, not as a fallen CEO, not as a corporate scapegoat, but as a woman who had finally spoken not just for herself, but for every voice that had been silenced beneath polished conference tables and redacted reports. The janitor's closet was quiet, too quiet. No buzz of the old fluorescent light overhead, no gentle rattle of mop buckets, no low hum of jazz music from Graham's pocket radio. Just stillness, and the hollow echo of a space that had once held the weight of a life rebuilt from ashes. Graham stood in the doorway, keys to the building hanging loosely from his finger. The metal ring tapped softly against the handle, a rhythm that matched the quiet ache in his chest. The shelf where he used to keep Emma's lunchbox empty. The corner hook where his old navy jacket had always hung bare. He opened the locker one last time. Inside only a folded piece of paper. It wasn't his. He unfolded it slowly, his name written on the front in an elegant slanted hand. "You didn't just clean floors, you cleaned up the mess they left behind. Thank you for reminding me who I am, A." He didn't smile. He couldn't. His face was too still, too full. Emotion had no space to move when the soul was busy trying to process something deeper. Instead, Graham reached into his satchel and pulled out a small drawing, Emma's latest masterpiece. 3 figures beneath a sky filled with stars. One tall man in a blue janitor's uniform, one woman with a streak of silver in her black hair and a justice scale in her hand. And between them, a little girl with wild curls and bright eyes. Above their heads, Emma had written, "My family." He pinned the drawing to the inside wall of the locker using the same thumbtack that had once held his late wife's photo. Then, gently, he shut the door. The soft click sounded final. But it wasn't grief, it wasn't loss, it was transition. A chapter closed with love, not regret. The spring wind outside the building had softened. It no longer stung like it had when he used to arrive before dawn. The sun was warm on his back as he stepped out into the courtyard for the last time. He walked slowly, each step measured not out of hesitation but respect. Every tile he crossed he had once mopped. Every trash bin along the way he had once emptied. Every night he'd spent keeping this place spotless. Had been his way of making sure Emma had food and that he could go home with his head held high. He reached the gate, and then he heard her voice. Leaving without saying goodbye, Arden. She stood on the sidewalk in front of the building, the breeze catching her coat. She looked different, less armored, more human. Her heels clicked softly as she approached, but there was no chill in her steps, only warmth. Graham turned to her lips, tugging into the faintest smile. "I figured I'd just fade into the background. I'm good at that. Not anymore." "You're not," she said gently. He raised an eyebrow. "You came here to thank me?" She shook her head. "I came here to offer you something." From the leather folder in her hand she pulled out a document. Thick, cream-colored, embossed with a seal. She held it out to him. He didn't take it, not yet. "I don't want a job," he said. "This isn't a job," Arden replied. "It's a legacy." He blinked. She inhaled slowly, words carefully chosen. "We're starting something new. A non-profit legal center, clean slate, funded by Lancaster but independent. We'll offer legal support to people who don't get heard, people like the ones you used to fight for. I want you to be our chief ethics advisor. Help us build something honest. From scratch." His breath caught, not because he didn't believe her, but because a part of him had always feared he no longer had anything left to give. She saw the hesitation and softened. "Graham, you don't owe me anything, but I've seen the way Emma looks at you, and I've seen the way she looks at me." He tilted his head, confused. Arden stepped closer, her voice lowering. "Last night, before the verdict, Emma asked if I was going to be her new mom." Time stopped. Just for a second. Graham felt something in his chest crack open, not in pain and surprise, in longing. She said, Arden continued, eyes glassy, that good people take care of each other, and that maybe we could all be good people. Together. The silence between them was thick with emotion neither dared name aloud. He took the folder from her hand, opened it, saw the position description, the mission statement, and a sticky note from Emma at the end. It was a drawing again. A mop turned into a sword. A courtroom turned into a home. And in the corner, in shaky handwriting, "We fight with truth. We live with love. We clean up the messes together." He looked up and saw Arden not as the CEO, not as the woman he had once only nodded to in sterile hallways, but as someone who had stayed, who had fought, who had trusted. "Why me?" he whispered. Arden smiled, slow and certain. "Because when the world tried to bury me, you didn't sweep me aside. You stood. You believed." A long pause. Then Graham said, his voice low, trembling, "I haven't let anyone close since my wife died. I didn't think I could." Arden stepped forward again now, only inches away. "I'm not asking you to replace anyone, Graham. I'm just asking if we can start, whatever this is, with honesty, with trust." Another beat passed, and then gently he reached out, not to take her hand, but to hold the edge of the folder together, side by side, a promise sealed not with a kiss, not yet, but with purpose, with something deeper, something earned. That night back at home, Graham tucked Emma into bed. She was already asleep, clutching a stuffed owl and murmuring something about capes and mop handles. On the wall above her bed hung a new picture. 3 people, a home, and underneath the words, justice, kindness, us. Graham looked at the stars through her window and whispered into the dark, "Thank you, Sarah. We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, he believed it. A year later, the old post office on Haddington Street didn't look anything like it used to. Where broken windows once let in nothing but rain and pigeons, now sunlight poured through fresh glass, warm and steady. The faded letters above the entrance had been replaced by a sleek, brushed steel sign that gleamed under the afternoon sky. The Clean Slate Project. Justice begins with truth. Inside the walls were painted soft white. The scent of fresh paint and brewed coffee mingled with the quiet tap of keyboards and the occasional ring of a desk phone. But the hum in the air wasn't just from electronics, it was something else. It was purpose. Graham stood just inside the front doors, watching a young mother nervously explain her eviction notice to a volunteer paralegal. Down the hall, a teenage boy in a hoodie filled out intake forms with the help of a social worker. And at the far end of the corridor, Arden stood in front of the media wall preparing for a live interview. She wore no blazer today, no mask of corporate armor, just a navy blouse, rolled sleeves, and a calm, clear voice. For too long, she told the local news anchor, legal power has been locked behind closed doors, priced too high, explained too poorly, and used too often to silence those without the means to speak. She glanced at Graham just off camera. He nodded. Her eyes softened, and she continued. The Clean Slate Project isn't just about helping people fight back, it's about helping them begin again. The journalist smiled. And the name. It's quite poetic. Arden looked toward the lobby. Toward the janitor's closet they had intentionally preserved repurposed now as the Ethics Archive, a room filled with backup drives, handwritten witness notes, and at its center a single framed photo of a mop bucket and a pair of work boots. I didn't name it, she said, voice lowering. A little girl did, after watching her father clean up everyone else's mess and still believe people could change. After the cameras shut off, Graham met Arden by the courtyard. Nice speech, he said, sipping his coffee. She grinned. I channeled my inner janitor. He chuckled. Careful, that's a slippery slope to wisdom. They sat on the stone bench near the new sculpture. It wasn't grand, just a brushed bronze statue of a broom leaning against a courtroom door. At its base, a quote was etched. Justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It begins with someone refusing to look away. Graham ran his fingers over the engraved metal. She would have loved this. Arden turned. Your wife. He nodded. Sarah believed in second chances, even when I didn't. There was a pause, quiet and full. Then Arden said softly, So do I. Back inside, children were drawing in the waiting room. Emma sat cross-legged beside them, leading the charge with crayons and laughter. Okay, everyone, she called out. Draw what you want. Justice to look like. One boy drew a superhero with scales for arms. Another scribbled a picture of a courtroom full of puppies. Emma, though, took her time. She held a single crayon gold and carefully drew a balance scale. On one side she placed a heart, on the other a mop. When Graham passed by, he stopped. What's this kiddo? Emma beamed. It's clean slate. Love and hard work make it stay balanced. He blinked back, something in his eyes. Smart girl. I learned from you, she said simply, and from Miss Arden. Later that evening, after the center had quieted and most had gone home, Graham walked past the hallway leading to the main offices. A small door caught his eye, one that hadn't been there the week before. It was freshly painted. A brass nameplate had just been screwed in. Graham Boone, Chief Ethics Advisor. He stood there a moment, unmoving. The last time he'd seen his name on a door, it had been outside a courtroom in Chicago. Before life fractured. Before grief redefined who he thought he was allowed to be. Now, here it was again, but not a return, a rebirth. He touched the edge of the plaque. And in that quiet hallway with nothing but the hum of new beginnings around him, he whispered, Thank you. That night, he and Arden locked up together. They walked slowly beneath the soft streetlights, Emma skipping ahead with a half-eaten cookie in hand. You ever think we'd end up here? Arden asked. No, Graham replied. But I'm glad we did. She slipped her hand into his. It wasn't dramatic. There was no cinematic swell of music, no lightning strike of passion. Just warmth, trust, a gentle knowing. Back home, Emma sat on the living room rug, gluing her newest drawing to a piece of poster board. Graham leaned over her shoulder. What's this one called? He asked. She held it up. A family of 3 standing in front of a building with shining windows and a banner that read Clean Slate. The father wore a tool belt and a tie. The mother wore a blazer and superhero boots. The little girl held a sign, Truth lives here. Emma smiled. It's our home now. Graham kissed the top of her head. Yes, it is. As night settled outside, the porch light flicked on, casting a soft glow over their small home. Inside, laughter drifted from the kitchen. 3 dinner plates, 3 chairs, and on the wall, framed above the table, a print of the quote Emma had scrawled long ago on the corner of a napkin. We fight with truth. We live with love. We clean up the messes together. Sometimes the most powerful names on the door aren't the ones people expect. They're the ones who never stopped standing even when no one was watching. The first day of spring brought more than sunshine. It brought birdsong on windowsills, the hum of a gentle breeze through the porch screen, and the scent of fresh earth waiting to bloom. The kind of day that reminded you life didn't always move forward in leaps, but in small, honest steps. On the back porch of a modest brick home on the edge of town, 3 chairs sat beneath a string of warm Edison lights still faintly glowing from the night before. Graham Boone leaned back in one of them, a cup of coffee in his hand, steam curling up into the crisp morning air. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms used to work to loss, and lately, to holding again. Beside him, Arden Lancaster tucked her feet beneath herself on the wicker chair, still in her soft pajamas, hair pulled into a casual bun that only made her look more at peace than he'd ever seen her. And on the porch floor between them, cross-legged and determined, Emma sat with a sketchbook in her lap and a purple crayon pressed tight in her fingers. "You're going to ruin your wrist holding it like that," Graham murmured. Emma didn't look up. "I'm designing the future. Wrists are replaceable." Arden laughed quietly. "What's today's masterpiece?" Emma turned the page toward them. 3 figures stood tall at the center. A woman in superhero boots, a man with a mop-turned sword, and a little girl holding a scale tipped with a heart on one side and a stack of books on the other. Above them, in looping gold cursive, "Justice begins at home." Graham felt something shift in his chest, the quiet kind of ache that wasn't pain, just proof that something inside you was finally soft enough to feel again. "I think we've got a future Chief Justice on our hands," he said. Emma wrinkled her nose. "Nope. I'm gonna be a lawyer, like Mom would have been proud of, like Dad used to be." She turned to Arden. "But first I want to mop a few floors at Clean Slate, just to remember where truth starts." Arden reached over, brushing a wisp of hair from Emma's brow. "Then that's exactly where you'll start." Later that afternoon, they walked into town together, hand in hand, no headlines following, no whispers in their wake. Just a family moving with purpose. The local bakery had set out folding chairs along the sidewalk, and the florist across the street had filled the window with tulips and daffodils. Spring, in every sense, had arrived. At the community square, a small crowd had already gathered. Today was the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Emma Boone Room, a new wing of the Clean Slate project dedicated to youth education in law ethics and digital truth. A podium stood at the front, modest and unpolished. A single microphone, a single banner behind it for every voice that was once silenced. Arden stood behind the mic, holding back tears more than notes. Some victories aren't meant to be shouted, they're meant to be shared. She looked at Graham. "At Clean Slate, we believe no one should have to stand alone when the world gets quiet, when systems fail, when truth is buried." Her gaze swept over the crowd. This center was born not from wealth, not from power, but from a janitor who refused to look away, a girl who believed in kindness, and a man who gave up everything once, only to give everything again. The applause was soft at first, then stronger, then standing. After the ceremony, Emma pulled her father aside and slipped something into his hand. It was a drawing, smaller this time, folded in quarters. Graham opened it slowly. A porch, 3 chairs, and inside the glow of one window, 3 shadows dancing. He cleared his throat. "What's this?" Emma smiled. "That's home. And what are we doing inside?" She grinned. Living, laughing, standing up. That evening, as dusk wrapped the town in lavender light, Graham, Arden, and Emma sat on the porch once more, the same 3 chairs, the same string of lights now glowing softly like a halo above them. "I used to think justice was about courtrooms," Graham said. Voice low, about rules, punishment, proving who's right. Arden looked at him, and now, he glanced down at Emma, who had curled against his side, half asleep. "Now I think it's about love," he whispered, "about seeing people when the world's too blind, about showing up when no one else will, about standing not for attention, but so others know they're not alone." Arden reached for his hand. He didn't flinch this time. The stars came out one by one. Above them, endless sky. Behind them, the glow of a justice center born from broken things made whole. Before them, everything still unwritten, and in that quiet, beautiful stillness, a family once scattered by grief and silence now stood together, not in courtrooms or headlines, but in love, and in truth, and in the ordinary magic of a spring night on a wooden porch. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won in battle, they're built in silence. One broom, one girl, one promise at a time. And maybe that's what justice really is. Not a courtroom, not a headline, but a quiet porch, a warm light, and someone who refuses to walk away when the world turns cold. Now, we want to hear your story. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city, your state, or your country in the comments. We read every single one. Whether you're in sunny Florida, quiet Montana, the heart of Texas, or halfway across the world in a midnight kitchen. Know this, you are part of something bigger now. If this story moved you even just a little, tap that like button, share it with someone who still believes in second chances, and most of all, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us we're never truly alone. This channel is built for people who still believe in the power of kindness and underdogs rising in quiet heroes like janitors, fathers, and little girls with big hearts. Thank you for spending this time with us. We're honored to have you here. And until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and always stand back up.